Welcome back, everyone. To close this transformative day, we're honored to present the concluding keynote titled Fathom the Mind, Heal the World, delivered by Dr. Bruce Alan Wallace, founder and president of the Center for Contemplative Research and the Santa Barbara Institute of Consciousness Studies. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Wallace.
It must be deja vu. Why don't we pause just for a moment to just rest and breathe, ground the awareness. So thank you for your stamina. It's been a full day, and I hope this closing period will be meaningful for you. I've come this very long distance to offer my best. I hope it's meaningful to you. That's my aspiration. We look at the main title here, Fathom the Mind, Heal the World, and this is the motto for our hermitage in Colorado in the United States. Our North Star, that which we navigate by, these two phrases. Fathom the mind. Maybe that seems self-explanatory, but maybe it's not. What does it mean to fathom the mind? To understand comprehensively, right down to the very ground, the ultimate dimension. What does it mean to fathom the mind? To fathom the mind, I think, must include insight, knowledge, into what are the origins of the mind. It's a natural phenomenon. Where does it come from? What are the origins of a developing fetus from the time that the sperm and egg come together and through the 9 months of development? When does the fetus become conscious? When does the human mind emerge, and from what does it emerge? If you don't know that, you haven't fathomed the mind. Where does it come from? But if we look at the history of planet Earth, it's 4.5 billion years old, and life has been on this planet for 3.5 billion years old. But at some point, between 3.5 billion years ago and now, at some point, the first conscious organisms emerged on our planet. Where did their consciousness come from? When did it happen? If you don't know the origins of consciousness, origins of mind, you have not fathomed the mind. Right? And now the mind is present. Clearly everybody here is awake. We all have a mind. What's the nature of the mind? And how does the mind relate to, engage with, interact with the body? What's the nature of the mind-body relationship and the relationship of the mind with the environment, with the natural world at large? What's the role of mind in nature? If you don't know that, you have not fathomed the mind. Sooner or later, we will not have a human mind any longer. It could be tomorrow. It could be 60 years from now, not probably for me before then. But what happens to the mind, your mind, my mind, at death? You're conscious right now. What happens to your consciousness when you die? What's its future? If you don't know that, you've not fathomed the mind. And then finally, what are the potentials of the mind? The potential for good, the potential for evil, the potential for creativity. What are the potentials of the mind? I would say with a great deal of confidence, the greatest natural resource that we've left largely unexplored is not the resources of oil or fossil fuels, or wind or solar or thermal energy. It's not the forests or the minerals in the earth, These are all natural resources, which, as we look outwards, we've really learned how to exploit, to use, to consume, and to use up the external resources around us. We've seen this great growth of consumption and, as Dr. He said, waste. We know a lot about the external resources. But what about the inner resources of the mind? I would say with great confidence, we've barely scratched the surface of tapping into and drawing forth the full potential of the mind. And if we have not done that, if we've not fathomed the potentials of the mind on multiple levels, coarse mind, subtle mind, ultimate dimension of mind, if we've not fathomed that, we have not fathomed the mind. And so many people would say, well, mind is a natural phenomenon, let's ask the scientists. But they don't have any answers to any of those questions. Lots of beliefs. But where is scientific knowledge of where consciousness emerged from? Where is science knowledge where the human mind emerges from? It's beliefs upon beliefs upon beliefs, but not knowledge. One of my dear friends, a physicist from Dartmouth University, commented when we had a symposium in San Francisco. He said, we don't know the nature of consciousness. We, speaking for the scientific community, it's a mystery. We don't know the nature of consciousness. But he didn't stop there. And he said, nobody knows the nature of consciousness. And if you've seen that video, then I leapt. How do you know that nobody knows? You know that you don't know, but you would have to be omniscient to know that nobody knows. How do you know that? Fathom the mind. Heal the world. A lot of people would say, well, why does the world need to be healed? I checked the window. I looked out the window this morning. It's a very pleasant day. There's no global climate change today. And a lot of people say, I've heard about global climate change, but I don't see anything different. I think maybe it doesn't exist. Or if it exists, just a natural phenomenon. Oh, heal what? The world's fine. Status quo, continue. Let's consume more. Let's increase the gross domestic product. Let's make sure that consumer spending is increasing, because that's how we really progress. More consumption, more consumption. Well, we're wrong. The world needs to be healed in ways that are very deep. And so here is a Buddhist response to the current meta-crisis. What is meta-crisis? Coin, but it's meta-crisis. Here we are. Okay, this is going to be huge. This is the topic of my whole lecture. To first of all understand what's meta-crisis. We know about global climate change and so forth. And I'm going to model this entire talk on the structure of the Four Noble Truths as taught by the Buddha. And the first truth is the reality of suffering. The first of the four realities in this 21st century for the global community is the meta-crisis. There's a lot of text here. But the point of meta-crisis is it's not just, oh, this is a crisis, and that's another, oh, and there's that crisis, like just a scattering of crises at the same time, but rather all of these collectively, that looks like about 10 items there, all of these individual crises are actually all interrelated. And so we can call the whole cluster of them together a meta-crisis. And let's see how serious this is. Global climate change, we all know about it. And it's not just a natural phenomenon. We've created it. It's a human product. Damage to the ecosphere. 2/3 of the world's wildlife, 1/3 of the forest, 2/3 of the grassland destroyed over the past several decades. 2/3 of the world's wildlife. When was the last time there was such global destruction? When did this happen? 66 million years ago. There was an asteroid 10 to 15 kilometers in diameter that plunged into the Gulf of Mexico. great asteroid, 66 million years ago. And very rapidly, with that massive collision of this asteroid with our planet, very quickly, in a matter of days or weeks, it drew into extinction 75% of the wildlife and the plants on planet Earth. Very rapidly. 75% kill off with one asteroid. We've killed 2/3. And much of the natural habitat, 1/3 of the forest and so forth, we are on the way to impacting planet Earth to a degree comparable to, and eventually maybe even surpassing, that of an asteroid. But we did it. We did it. And we're not slowing down. The environmentalists are saying, stop, stop, slow down, stop, stop, stop. And we continue in status quo. America, China, Russia, Brazil, the industrialized countries of the world are not even slowing down. So we have not even begun slowing down the destruction. But it's not only that corruption in governments, collapse of collaboration across differences, need no commentary, drastic increase in the development, proliferation, and employment of weapons of mass destruction. No commentary. Toxic nationalism, leading to violent invasions, wars, and threat of nuclear war. All at the same time, let's just not stop. Mental health catastrophes, unprecedented rates of depression and anxiety. Mental disease is on the increase, especially among young people. Death among youth from suicide, drug addiction, and overdose. These are all interrelated. These are not just individual, isolated. They're all of the same combination. Pandemic. Well, we all know about COVID. Don't think that's finished, and don't think there won't be more. That's viral? What about the bacterial? Pandemic and the likelihood of even more destructive types of pandemic disease, viral or bacterial. Exponential population growth combined with voracious appetite of hedonism and consumerism, where our population is growing and we're consuming more and more and more, as if all of these resources are replenishable, and they are not. We are attacking our own home. So when the Buddha spoke of the reality of suffering and the full extent of the range of suffering to which we are vulnerable, it turns out to be a lot worse than we thought. The meta-crisis is a lot worse than most people think. They think it's someplace else or it's sometime in the future. It's not. It's worse than you imagined. This meta-crisis is recent, unprecedented, and it's escalating. And we're not even remotely doing enough to effectively deal with it. It's not enough to know the reality of suffering. If there's to be any freedom, any healing, you have to know the causes. The second reality, the second noble truth, the origin of suffering. What are, first of all, the conditions contributing to the meta-crisis? Why now? Why not 500 years ago? Human civilization around the planet is 5,000 years old in multiple places. 5,000 years. Why now? Why not 1,000 years ago? 2,000? Because something happened recently and starting in the mid-19th century. The rise of fossil fuel-based industrialism and its resultant global urbanization that started in the mid-19th century, a major contributor to the meta-crisis. Colonialism, and it's European, and it's especially in the 19th century, it's British colonialism, spanning the entire earth, but also Americans and Germans and French and Dutch and so forth and so on, Italian and Spanish, colonialism and the blatant exploitation of human cultures and natural resources. It was at its peak in the 19th century. Capitalism and communism, both heavily materialistic, and both embracing a worldview of scientific materialism, both having as their prime value hedonism, which I don't mean something vulgar like just drinking and sex and what have you, but hedonism in the sense that all of our happiness comes from outside. The human mind has no resources for being happy on its own. It comes from consumption. It comes from getting things from the world. That's hedonism as a prime value. And then what kind of way of life emerges from a materialistic worldview and a value system of hedonism is consumerism. The more you consume, the more successful you are. And the assumption is you'll be happier. Now, another point that I'm going to return to, but I think is maybe even the most important, the secularization of education that occurred starting in the mid-19th century in Great Britain. That's when it began. Before that, in Europe, education was thoroughly embedded in a Christian worldview, Christian values, Christian ethics. But then, in the minds of many people, the worldview of the Bible, taken literally, had been discredited by astronomy, by geology, by Darwinism. And many people thought, I can't believe that anymore because look, it was wrong, it was wrong, it was wrong. And so many people then, mid-19th century, then threw out Christianity as the context for education, and they introduced, where it had been, they introduced scientific materialism, the worldview, hedonism as the values, and consumerism of the way of life. And this has saturated secular modern education ever since. Exponential increase of the development of weapons of mass destruction. It's both part of the reality of suffering, but it's a cause of that reality of suffering as well. The dramatic increase of unequal distribution of wealth, where roughly half the human population is living on $1 or $2 a day, but then we have people who have 100 billion, 90 billion, more than 100 billion. 8 people own as much of the assets of the planet as half of the human population. How is that healthy? How is that sustainable? And how can those people who have 80 or 100 billion, how can they enjoy that much wealth? How many meals can you eat per day? And so we now have the wealthiest 1% owning 43% of global financial assets, which is leaving hundreds of millions of people in poverty. While a few have so much money they can't even imagine how to spell it. And all of this, to sum up, in terms of these contributing conditions, can be traced to the mid-19th century Europe and America amidst unprecedented illusions of progress. Progress is more industrialization. Progress is more consumption. Progress is more and more of the same of consumption and depleting the earth. That is the list of contributing conditions. Why now and not five? Well, because this occurred in the mid-19th century. And this meta-crisis can be stemmed explicitly from the mid-19th century. It was a major shift. And it started in Europe and it's become global. Whatever countries were either colonized by Europe or dominated by Europe in the 19th century are all now part of the problem. And it's a Eurocentric problem. So what do these all have in common? They're all facets of the same problem. The meta-crisis is a cluster of one crisis that has many facets. So we see ecological destruction and so forth. But these are the contributing conditions, but at a deeper level. How did this happen? These mental health catastrophes, drug addiction, and so forth. Where do these come from if we look deeper to causes that are not simply in the 19th century, but are persistent throughout all of human history? And this is where we really bring in the wisdom of Buddhism. 3 poisons of the mind. 3 poisons of the mind. Now, we have in Pali and Sanskrit the terms that are precise, and I suspect, but I don't know, in classical Chinese Buddhist literature, you found very exact counterparts to these 3 poisons. We don't have that in English. So we'll say attachment, hatred, and delusion, the 3 poisons, but none of these quite captures the meaning in Buddhism. But these 3 escalated to create existential risk to humanity. None of these cooperative conditions would have arisen had it not been for these 3 poisons that are at the root. But let's look more carefully. Because these three poisons, we need to have a precise understanding of them, because the Buddha himself said, for all of suffering, these are the root causes of all suffering, and they're in the mind. Then we better know exactly what he meant, and not just more or less greed, hatred, and so forth. So I want to move fairly quickly here, but this is crucially important. We have the Sanskrit lobha. We can translate it as craving, or attachment, or greed, or lust. But it's not just any one of those three, but precisely what is this poison? What are its defining characteristics with precision? If you're a brain surgeon and you know there's a tumor in the brain, you want to cut out all of the tumor, not just part of it, but you don't want to cut out healthy tissue. So you don't want too much or too little. Likewise, when it comes to applying remedies to this first poison, we need to know exactly how much is the problem. The mental affliction, or the klesha, of craving, greed, attachment, it disturbs the mind due to an intense longing and striving for things such as wealth, power, fame, and sensual pleasures, which it views as inherently attractive and as a true source of happiness. If only I had more money. If only I had more leadership, power, influence. If only more people knew me, I had more fame, status, renown, then I would be happy. If only I had more food, a bigger car, a nicer house, better, then I would be happy. You're delusional. And attachment is rooted in delusion, a misapprehension of reality. And we've seen that before. But that's very specific. It's not the same as desire. When the Tzu Chi volunteers come here, they're coming out of desire to be of service. That's good. Desire is not the problem. The mental affliction of lobha, that's the problem. Desires can be wonderful. What about hatred or anger? Well, hatred and anger, pretty much. What about the mental affliction of that? It disturbs the mind again. It disturbs the mind. When anger, the mental affliction of anger, dominates the mind, it disturbs the mind, causing it to become malevolent and harsh in response to encountering obstacles to the fulfillment of one's cravings or to be separated from the object of one's attachment. Why do individuals become angry, hateful, violent? That's why. Why do countries become violent, hateful? That's the problem. Why do ethnic groups or religious groups, why do we become malevolent and harsh? Because of the mental affliction of hatred. And finally, the fundamental root of all of these afflictions is delusion or moha. But what's delusion? It's rooted in ignorance of the nature of oneself and other phenomena. We don't know who we are, we don't know the nature of reality, including the nature of one's own identity, including ignorance of the true causes of happiness and unhappiness, and it results in a misapprehension of how phenomena exist, thus disturbing the mind. We've seen before today, delusion, the misapprehension of reality, is the root of suffering. Delusion is the root of the other two poisons. It's not knowing, and therefore the remedy for not knowing, the remedy for delusion, is not altruism alone, it's not compassion alone. It has to be knowledge. It has to be insight and wisdom. That's the only remedy for ignorance, is the opposite of ignorance, which is knowing. Now there are two types of delusion. There's the connate delusion we're born with, such as viewing oneself and others as being inherently autonomously existent, separate, autonomous. My country, America number one. Germany number one. Taiwan number one. Look out for your own country, never mind other country. Look out for me, never mind other people. My family, my ethnic group. That's connate. We're born with that. You don't have to learn it. But there's also other kind of delusion that we are acquired delusion. You're not born with it, but you can be raised in a culture where in addition to connate delusion, you have another layer that's acquired. So, one example of that is belief in scientific materialism. I would say without a shadow of a doubt, a materialistic worldview is delusional. But babies aren't born that way. You have to learn it. But if you learn it, you can also unlearn it. But it is a delusion with catastrophic effects. This will become clear as we proceed. So why now? Why has this meta-crisis arisen and continues to burgeon, to grow, to intensify since the mid-19th century? Why now? What turned these three poisons, which we've all had and animals have and other sentient beings have, what turned the three principles, which have always been present, into something that could do so much damage to the ecosphere and imperil human civilization as we know it? They've always been there, but why now do we have this unprecedented catastrophe, the likes of which planet Earth has not seen for 66 million years? And we've done this in 175 years. But it's slower, it's not so dramatic. When the asteroid hit, everybody knew it. There were no human beings back then. But all the animals, all the dinosaurs that died, they knew about it. They didn't know about asteroids, but boy, they felt the impact. It's sudden, it's dramatic, and it's extinction. But what we have with this meta-crisis, it's just slowly creeping until it may be too late to turn back the effects. So, the causes were already there, but these specific contributing conditions in the mid-19th century turned it into a global and unprecedented catastrophe. And I said, fathom the mind, heal the world. I've cited many scientists recognize there are a number of mysteries that science has not yet solved. They have a nice list of them. And on all the list, consciousness is always there. What a mystery, what a mystery. But consciousness is become a blind spot in the scientific vision of reality, like the blind spot in our visual field. You know where the optic nerve touches the back of the retina. There are points on the left and the right where there's no data. You're not getting any information. It's a blind spot. Well, I would suggest that in the modern scientific view of reality, consciousness is in the blind spot. We don't know how ignorant we are. So what kind of blind spot? Well, if you read scientific literature, there's no consensual definition of consciousness. All kinds of different ideas, but there's no scientific definition of consciousness. There's no means of objectively detecting consciousness or any mental phenomenon. It's non-physical. And physicists, scientists are very good at observing physical phenomena, but consciousness isn't physical. So are aphids conscious? Are minerals conscious? Are plants conscious? Are babies during the first 2 weeks after gestation, are they conscious? The answer is they don't have a clue, because they can't measure it, not objectively, because it doesn't exist objectively. So we don't know. What are the neural correlates of consciousness, especially including the subtler degrees of mental consciousness? Don't know. What are the necessary and sufficient causes that give rise to consciousness? Whether in a fetus, whether 3 billion years ago, what are the natural causing conditions that give rise to consciousness? Don't know. And then ignorance of how the brain generates or even influences mental phenomena, and how the mind influences the body and other phenomena. We can find neural correlates of anger, of sadness, of sleep, of dreams, and so forth. But of mental consciousness itself, they don't know. And to know the neural correlate isn't to know the nature of consciousness, but they don't even know what the neural correlates are. So this is a lot of ignorance. But it's covered over with beliefs. The illusions of knowledge, thinking you know something, where all you have is in fact beliefs, assumptions, speculations, or faith. That, well, after all, of course, the brain generates consciousness. So I've read article after article in mainstream scientific literature saying, what a mystery it is. How is it that the brain generates consciousness? Without asking, does the brain generate consciousness, and ignoring the empirical evidence that the brain doesn't generate consciousness at all. It influences it, yes. Does it generate? Does consciousness come out of neurons? No. So it's ignorance, but it's covered over with beliefs. And that's a blind spot. The enigma of human intelligence. The question is, why are we so intelligent? In terms of evolutionary biology, the evolution of animals in general, primates in specific, 250 million years ago or so, Homo sapiens sapiens arose, and we're so wildly, outrageously more intelligent than chimpanzees and gorillas and other of our primate fellows. Why are we so intelligent? Biologically speaking, given the principle of parsimony, in evolution you get what you need to survive and procreate, but you don't get 10 or 1,000 times more. A cheetah running after the gazelles doesn't run at 300 miles an hour. 50 miles an hour is sufficient. For evolution, survival and procreation, you get what you need, but you don't get more. But we have so much more intelligence than we possibly need for survival and procreation. Crocodiles and alligators are much more successful than we are, and they have a brain about the size of a walnut. Rats are very successful. Cockroaches, very successful. You don't have to be smart to survive and procreate. Why are we so smart? There's no evolutionary reason for it. There's no answer biologically, which means that biological evolution is utterly incomplete if it can't explain why we're so intelligent. And it doesn't. I've asked world-class biologists. They don't know. Which means you don't know who you are, and you don't know how you got here, and you don't know why you're so intelligent. But if we're so intelligent, exponentially more than our nearest neighbors and the primates, how is it that we can be so smart and so foolish that we're destroying the only environment we have? We're so smart, but why is our smartness going into the very instruments of destruction that's wiping out wildlife, wiping out natural habitats, disrupting the flow of climate and so forth? Why are we doing this to ourselves? Have we become insane? Why can we be so intelligent and so foolish? We're using the same brilliant faculty of intelligence to destroy our own home. And no other species could do the damage we are doing. We're smarter than all the other ones, but chimpanzees or reptiles or any of the other species, none of them remotely can do the kind of damage we can. How can we be so smart and so idiotic to destroy our own home? Given our extraordinary levels of intelligence, memory, imagination, language skills, why are we as a species and as individuals not becoming wiser, happier, and more virtuous? With each generation and with each year of our lives, we have the ability to remember. We pass down what we know with literature. We pass on our wisdom from generation to generation. Over the last 5,000 years of civilization, why, from century to century, are we not all becoming happier? And we're not. Why not? Unanswered questions. Time to move on to the third reality. Is there any hope? There are many environmentalists say, I think we've already crossed the tipping point. We gave you plenty of warning. They knew about global climate change in the 1960s. They saw it coming. Overpopulation, they knew in the 60s. And still we haven't done even remotely enough to remedy it. Is it all hopeless? Or will it simply inevitably be the case that before the end of this century, human civilization as we know it will be finished and hundreds of millions of people will die? Is it already too late to avert that catastrophe? Because that's what we are, those are the seeds we are sowing, and that's the harvest we will reap if we simply maintain the status quo. People don't want to hear that. And they certainly don't want to hear that it's hopeless. But a lot of young people think it is hopeless, and then they fall into depression. And we wonder why, and then give them antidepressants. So is there hope? Is there a third noble truth here? Is there a possibility of freedom, of meeting this whole network of crises and overcoming them so that human civilization can not only survive, but actually flourish, and possibly flourish like never before? Is it possible? Is there a vision that we can bring to mind? There's a possibility. As the Buddha said, there's suffering, there's an origin of suffering, but there's a reality of the cessation of suffering and its causes. This, he said, I know. I am a Buddha, and I know this is true. It's not a belief. And for the many arhats who followed him, we know that the reality of the cessation of suffering and its causes is possible. We know it. Okay, what is the vision? What could be the outcome that we're all longing for of the cessation of the first two realities, the meta-crisis, the contributing conditions, and the underlying causes? What kind of world would we love to live in? Whether you're from China or America, Russia or Brazil, what all human beings want, isn't it true? Isn't there something we all want? Capitalist, communist, in a dictatorship or democracy, isn't there something we all want equally? Whatever religion, ethnicity, and so forth, we all want to flourish socially and environmentally. We want to flourish and live in harmony with each other. Don't we all want that? Don't we all want to live in harmony with the natural environment? We want that. How could that occur? There has to be ethics. We have to live non-violent lives with respect to our fellow human beings, to other species, and the natural environment. There must be the ethics of non-violence, a non-violent and benevolent way of life. Ethics is the key. It's the foundation. And it has to be rooted in, or resulting in, it's a non-violent, benevolent way of life, and it can result in harmony within family, communities, nations, and among nations. It's possible. There's nothing outside that requires us to live in disharmony. We can choose. Harmony with the ecosphere, maintaining sustainable economies without environmental degradation. We could do that if we can imagine it. We could realize it. And that's what we want, something sustainable. A harmonious balance of unity and diversity. We don't want just one religion. It wouldn't work. One economic system, one religion. Uniformity. Dictators always want uniformity, so everybody lines up and does what they're told. But when everybody's the same, it's not sustainable. When everybody's diverse and there's no unity, then we all disagree with each other. It has to be a balance of unity and diversity. And that's social and environmental flourishing, and it comes from the cultivation of ethics. Among the 3 higher trainings, Sila, Samadhi, Prajna, it's ethics. That's the key. It's doable. You just have to be ethical. Then there's psychological flourishing. This is within the mind. Can we flourish psychologically, and what would that mean? This is rooted in the Buddhist terminology in samadhi, which means this unification of the mind, the composure of the mind, the clarity, the balance of the mind. Rooted in a samadhi that practiced to achieve balance in body and mind, resulting in mental health, contentment, and joy arising from within. This takes some inner cultivation. It's not enough always to be looking outwards, 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 even with benevolence. We need to be cultivating the mind too. Cultivating these virtues within so we can manifest them outside. And that's samadhi. It's the second higher training. And the third and final higher training in Buddhism results in spiritual flourishing, and this is rooted in wisdom, entailing rigorous contemplative inquiry, looking at reality from the inside out, resulting in supreme well-being through knowing reality as it is. And we've heard references to that today, of a bliss that arises from within by tapping into the deepest dimension of consciousness of knowing reality as it is. And lo and behold, when you fathom the nature of reality, the response is bliss flows from that realization. That's true. Buddha found it's true, and not only Buddhists. So that's a possibility. It's a possibility of freedom from all of the whole network of meta-crises, and a new stage in evolution in human civilization that's sustainable, because this doesn't require mass consumption. Now, many scientists, and I've met them, feel that if we scientists don't know something, then nobody knows. And that's what my friend, the physicist, said. We don't know the nature of consciousness. Nobody knows the nature of consciousness. But we're missing out on something. That scientific inquiry is not the only kind of rigorous inquiry. Scientific knowledge is not the only kind of knowledge. And for hundreds of years in India, hundreds of years, centuries in China and in Southeast Asia and in Central Asia, Tibet, Mongolia. There have been hundreds and hundreds of years of professional contemplatives seeking to fathom the nature of reality from the inside out. Science seeks to fathom the nature of reality from the outside in. And when they finally get in, they equate the mind with the brain, so it's still out. And they never get in. Because training in mindfulness, samadhi, introspection is not part of scientific education. So they're still trying to understand the mind by looking at the brain. The contemplatives of the world have made enormous discoveries. The Buddhist contemplatives for 2,600 years have made discoveries, replicated discoveries, rigorously, intelligently, rationally. And of course, so have Taoists, and so have Hindus, and so forth. There are contemplative discoveries, and contemplative inquiry is rooted in ethics. No ethics, you can't be a contemplative. No ethics, you can be a scientist. You can be a terrible scientist and use your intelligence to create weapons of mass destruction or destroy the... But you can't be an accomplished contemplative if your practice is not rooted in ethics. It's impossible. What is virtue then? It consists of behavior of body, speech, and mind that is conducive to one's own and others' genuine well-being. Contemplative inquiry must be rooted in such ethics. Then there's contemplative technology. As scientists have technology, telescopes, and so on, the technology for contemplatives is the achievement of samadhi, achieved by way of cultivating refined attention, mindfulness, introspection, and that's your technology. The telescope is to astronomy what samadhi is to exploring the mind. If you can't focus your attention and sustain your attention, you can't make any rigorous, replicable discoveries about the nature of the mind, because technology won't help you. Technology works very well for the outside world. All kinds of technology, fantastic. But it's useless for fathoming the nature of the mind. And then there's contemplative science, containing rigorous theoretical and experiential inquiry into those fundamental issues about the nature of the mind, which remain unsolved, remain mysteries, covered over with beliefs by the scientific community, insight into the origin, nature, and destination of the mind, insight into the inner causes of mental distress and well-being, insight into the role of the mind in the natural world, insight into the very meaning of existence altogether. And finally, and we heard this from Dr. Wollicott this morning, the very ground of being, the deepest mystical realizations, it's knowledge. It's not speculation, it's not just subjective experience. It's answering humanity's deepest questions. What's the very nature of reality? What's the very nature of meaning, a meaningful life, and meaning in the universe? These are questions that have been addressed by centuries and centuries of highly advanced, accomplished contemplatives, especially in Asia. Especially in Asia. Hindus going back 4,000 years. The Taoists come more than 2,000 years. Buddhists more than 2,000 years. These are the best and the brightest of classical India, classical China, classical Tibet, Southeast Asia. In many cases, the best and the brightest went into Dharma and became contemplatives and made discoveries that have been replicated hundreds or thousands of times over the last 2 or 3 millennia and remains almost entirely unknown by the modern. We think meditation, oh, you mean mindfulness? Oh yeah, it's very good for reducing stress. That's like saying, getting a telescope and say, you know, this is a very good baseball bat. And having no idea what the potentials of a telescope are, but you can hit a ball with it. We come to the fourth reality, in Buddhism, the reality of the path, the noble truth of the reality of the path. We envision freedom, the possibility of freedom. That's good. But how do we get from here to there? What's the path connecting the present moment to the actual realization of nirvana, the actual realization of Buddhahood itself? What's the path? Well, we could spend the rest of the year, the rest of the decade, talking about the Buddhist reality of the path, but this brings this into the contemporary world, the 21st century, where I have simply arranged a matrix, a six-fold matrix of mental balance, as a path to authentic flourishing. Now, this is a matrix that I've devised, but I'm a flower arranger. I didn't grow any of the flowers. I'm not responsible for flowers, but I plucked this flower and this flower, mostly from Buddhism, and then I've arranged them. This is extremely profound. That is not because I'm profound, because the Buddha Dharma from which I'm drawing these flowers, that's profound. But everything for a person who knows Buddhism say, yeah, but that's familiar. Oh, but yeah. But a person who doesn't know Buddhism would say, that's very interesting. I wonder where that comes from. Somebody's very smart here. Let's go through them quickly, because time is passing quickly. Conative is an adjective that many people don't know. Conation is the noun. Psychologists know it, but hardly anybody else does. But it's a very important term, as important as cognition, as attention, and so forth. Conation is a whole cluster of mental processes focusing on desire, intention, aspiration, motivation, goals, priorities. It's what we want. It's conation. And conative intelligence is being wise in what desires we embrace and devote our lives to. Conative unintelligence is embracing desires that even if we follow them, it won't give their happiness, or it can actually lead to suffering. That's conative unintelligence. A great Indian Bodhisattva from the 8th century, Indian Bodhisattva named Shantideva, said, while we seek freedom from suffering, we hasten after the causes of suffering. While we wish to find happiness, out of delusion, we destroy the causes of our happiness as if they were our foes. And he's speaking about us. And this is conative unintelligence. So in this schemata, this matrix, I've drawn this from Indian Ayurvedic medicine and from traditional Tibetan medicine, where you have the three constituents of wind, bile, and phlegm, vata, pitta, kapha, and you're ill if any one of these three is in excess, deficient, or malfunctioning. Right? It's core to Indian Ayurvedic and traditional Tibetan medicine. I've applied this to these 6 types of mental balance. Conative, if you desire too much, you're obsessive, you're infatuated. That will not turn out well. If you have a deficit of conation, you'll be apathetic, listless, having no direction, no vision. If you have dysfunctional desires, aspirations, and goals, it won't turn out well, because you destroy your own and others' well-being. Too much, too little, dysfunctional. Hyperactivity, deficit, or dysfunction. One can be likewise ethical, being an ethical fanaticist, a fanatic, that my ethics is better than your ethics, and my ethics, and being all about rules. Excessive. One can be deficient in saying, well, ethics is whatever you say it is, no big deal. And dysfunctional is having really delusional sense of ethics, what is right and wrong, and being completely wrong about it. Attention, well, we know that. Attention, hyperactivity, and deficit. Dysfunctional attention is attending in ways that are very destructive. Cognitive hyperactivity is where we are projecting things on reality that aren't there. As somebody came up today, where we get so caught up in our thoughts, it obscures the reality that's presenting it to itself moment to moment. We're just caught up in our own fabrications. Hyperactivity, cognitive deficit, is where we don't see something that's in plain sight. It's right there, you should see it, and you still don't see it. There are countless examples. I could spend all day on this topic. Emotional, excessive emotional, you're bipolar. You're flip-flopping between extreme happiness and suffering. Flip-flop, excessive. Deficit, you're apathetic, you're dissociated, you're out of touch. Dysfunctional, having emotions that are really destructive, like taking delight in others' misfortune. That's an emotion. Dysfunctional. Spiritual also can be excessive, A spiritual fanatic is like religious fanatics that are willing to kill everybody who doesn't share their beliefs. A spiritual deficit is, I don't care about that stuff, that's for religious people, but they're basically delusional anyway. And thinking spirituality is just mumbo-jumbo. And dysfunctional, of course, is thinking of things that are truly spiritual, but they're actually not. So this is a map. It is something like the periodic table of elements. Before that was devised, you just had, well, there's iron here and sulfur here, hydrogen over there. It was just a whole jumble of elements. The periodic table was devised, and then suddenly it all makes sense, and it has predictive ability, an enormous explanatory ability, because they all fit into their place. I have spoken with health professionals around the world and said, here are 6. It can be too much, too little, or dysfunctional. Can you tell me a single mental disease that cannot be understood within this framework? And they've always said no, they all actually fit. This is a periodic table of mental health and mental illness. Because when you develop these 6 types of intelligence, you become more and more and more mentally balanced, greater and greater well-being, extraordinarily healthy, like, for example, Dharma Master Cheng Yin. She's extraordinarily mentally healthy, to say the least. She's not mentally imbalanced, she's way up above the norm. Dalai Lama the same, and many people, Christian, Muslim, and so forth. There are people of exceptional mental balance, and we should be going in that direction. And there are people who are exceptionally mentally imbalanced, and they can even become heads of state. And when they do a great deal of destruction. So that was just a very brief introduction here. But this has an enormous amount of explanatory power to it, and that there are remedies for each of these types of imbalance, and of course there are complex imbalances as well. Cognitive intelligence. Again, time is running quickly, but I will try to be right to the point and keep you awake, because it's been a long day. Cognitive intelligence. What does it mean to be cognitively wise? Wise in your desires. The English aphorism, be careful what you wish for, you may get it. Well, maybe it's not a wish you should have ever had, because if you fulfill it, you'll be unhappy, and if you don't fulfill it, you'll be unhappy. Cognitive intelligence fundamentally means that you prioritize genuine well-being over mundane happiness. The modern education system is all about finding mundane happiness. How do you determine whether a university is first-rate, like Cambridge or Oxford, Harvard, Princeton, Yale, top of the mound? They're number 1, right? How did they get to be number 1? Because their graduates turn out to be, in many cases, very successful financially, very famous, Nobel Prizes and so forth, or ascend to great positions of leadership and power. If you achieve wealth and power and status, then you're a very successful graduate. And if a university turns out a lot of people who become financially successful and rise to positions of leadership and become very famous and noted, renowned, and so forth, say, wow, that's a good university. But that's all mundane happiness. And it's never satisfying. Whereas the great sages of the world, Zhuangzi, the Buddha, Socrates, Aristotle, and the list goes on and on. The great wisdom traditions of the world, all of them, all of the great religions, and many of the greatest philosophies, Socrates and Aristotle, for example, distinguish between 2 types of happiness. Mundane happiness is what you get from the world, by means of wealth, power, and prestige. Then you get a lot of things. You get people to admire you, you get power, you get wealth, you get enjoyment. It's mundane because you get it from the world, but the more I take, the less you have. The more the United States takes, the less Mexico has. The more Russia takes, the less Ukraine has. And the list goes on and on and on. These are by nature competitive. One has more, everybody else has less, and they don't like it. It's not sustainable because they'll get back at you sooner or later. The have-nots will retaliate against the haves. It's not sustainable. And for many people, when they think of happiness, that's all they think of. Oh, it's wealthy, it's become famous, powerful. But it doesn't bring happiness. Think of Joseph Stalin. Does he look like a happy character to you? You ever seen any images of him? Did Hitler look happy to you? Look at other dictators in the present and the past. Do they look happy to you? Immense wealth, power, prestige, fame, and yet you look at them and say, that you look so sad and so angry and so anxious and so fearful. You got the power, but where's the happiness? And whatever you get, you will lose. Definite, guaranteed. Death takes away everything that you acquired. That's mundane happiness. It's stimulus-driven. It's stemming from sensory, intellectual, aesthetic stimulation, biological influence on the brain, taking drugs or alcohol and so forth. And it's something you pursue, the pursuit of happiness, as if it's out there and you run after it and try to capture it, like a leopard tries to capture a gazelle. And it's derived from what we can get from the world. But if you get it from the world, it will be taken away from you. You get it from the world, somebody else wants it, and they won't like it. But naturally gives rise to conflict. Genuine well-being. This is the cultivation of genuine well-being. Many of the greatest sages of history have said this is the meaning of life. Not hedonic or ordinary pleasure. It's genuine well-being. The Greeks call it eudaimonia. And arises from not from what we get from the world, but from what we bring to it. And it's something to be cultivated through training in ethics, mental balance, and wisdom. It's something to be cultivated from within, but you never, ever get it from outside. Which means the cultivation of eudaimonia, or genuine well-being, is by nature never, ever competitive. Never competitive. If you cultivate ethics, nobody gets jealous and tries to beat you. You cultivate mental balance, nobody has less. You cultivate compassion and wisdom, nobody else has less. That's sustainable. And the whole point of mundane happiness is to cultivate genuine well-being. It's fundamental. Fundamental starting point of cognitive intelligence. This could be taught in every school in the world, and we'd have a very different world as a result. Cognitive intelligence, ethical intelligence, do no harm. Core Buddhism. Do no harm, and when possible, be of benefit. Make your life meaningful. Don't harm other people, other species, or the environment. Don't harm, at least no harm. And when you see the possibility to be of benefit, take advantage of that opportunity. That's ethics. Ethical intelligence. It's conduct of body, speech, and mind, and ethical conduct nurtures one's own and others' genuine well-being, whereas unethical behavior undermines it. So with no allusion to God and God punishing and rewarding, no allusion to reincarnation and karma, which most people don't believe in, but this doesn't depend on some theological or metaphysical belief. It does depend on being able to distinguish between mundane happiness and genuine well-being, and knowing that genuine well-being can be ultimately and absolutely fulfilling, satisfying, and mundane pleasure never, ever can be. Whatever you get, you're going to lose it. So to prioritize the cultivation of genuine well-being over the pursuit of mundane being is cognitive intelligence, and putting that into action means ethical intelligence. Shantideva, who I mentioned earlier, he comments, this is core pith instruction within the Bodhisattva way of life. When one sees one's mind to be attached or repulsed, the two poisons, either one, then one should neither act nor speak, but remain still like a piece of wood, perceiving in this way that the mind is afflicted under the domination of one of the three poisons, perceiving in this way that the mind is inflicted or engaged in fruitless activities, the hero, the bodhisattva, the heroic bodhisattva, should always firmly control it by means of an antidote. If everybody on earth, 8 billion people, religious, non-religious, Hindu, Muslim, Christian, if all of us would observe our minds carefully and recognize those occasions on which our mind has come under the domination of attachment or hatred or delusion, and we recognize it, It's like recognizing you come down with COVID. What do you do when you just recognize that you have succumbed to a very, very contagious disease? What do you do if you're at all morally responsible? You don't go out and party. You quarantine yourself and you remain like a piece of wood. You stay home to protect other people from being infected with the COVID, which you can't just make it go away, but at least you can do damage control and not be contagious to other people. At least put on a mask. If you see that your mind is under the domination of craving, hate, or delusion, you have succumbed to an affliction which is highly contagious. But not just physically. It's contagious by way of television, internet, telephone, email. If you're really angry at something and you express it, you may very well infect other people with that same anger. Anger of racism, anger of noxious or toxic nationalism. Mental afflictions are highly contagious and far more damaging than any viral or bacterial contagious disease. When you see you're infected, be like a piece of wood and don't act, don't engage, don't socialize, don't spread this affliction. And if everybody did that, there'd be world peace overnight. Without believing in this religion or that religion, we can't just stop the mental afflictions from arising. But we can stop enacting them and preventing them from being contagious. Until, like COVID, you get it, and sooner or later, it'll probably be gone. And then you can socially engage once again. So when you identify any one of the three poisons, attachment, hatred, delusion, in your mind, quarantine yourself and all the world's problems could be solved if everyone did this. How's that for a simple solution? Okay, moving ahead. Attentional intelligence. It's overcoming the problems of attention deficit and hyperactivity. One very simple method for there is mindfulness of breathing. And the Buddha gave this beautiful analogy just as in the last month of the hot season in India, that's like May or June, when a mass of dust and dirt has swirled up, a great rain cloud out of season disperses it and quells it on the spot. So too, concentration by mindfulness of breathing, when developed and cultivated, is peaceful, sublime, an ambrosial dwelling, and it disperses and quells on the spot unwholesome states whenever they arise. You don't need to believe in a particular worldview or belief system to practice mindfulness of breathing, but if you really cultivate it, it calms the mind. It brings about a state that is peaceful, a peace of mind. The mind is calm, it's quiet, it's composed. You can't get that with drugs or going out to some peaceful place, because you bring your unpeace with you. But you go deeper, and it's not only peaceful, but you enter into a state that is sublime, and this is genuine well-being. When the mind calms, becomes composed, you sense a sense of genuine well-being arising from your own mind, not contingent upon external stimuli. And then he says it's an ambrosial dwelling. This is a huge surprise for most psychologists. They think, well, you meditate, of course, you become peaceful, maybe you feel very calm, that's nice, yep. But an ambrosial dwelling, he's talking about bliss that is not stimulus-driven. It's bliss as a symptom of a mind that is beautifully balanced and is not dependent on any contributing conditions from outside. That's a bliss that's your own heritage, it's your own birthright. Whether you actually own it, that's up to you. But that's developing attentional intelligence, where you see for yourself that genuine well-being really can be manifested from within. You know it. Cognitive intelligence is huge. It's overcoming both connate as well as acquired delusion. And so now, as I've mentioned before, especially since the mid-19th century, the major world-dominating acquired delusion is the domination of the belief that matter is primary and everything in the universe consists of matter and the emergent properties of matter. That view has been now completely repudiated by the cutting-edge discoveries in quantum physics and especially quantum cosmology. The branch of science that has most utterly demolished any credibility to materialism is the branch of science that has the deepest insight into matter. And there's no question that's quantum mechanics. The deepest insight into elementary particles, atoms, so forth, is found in quantum mechanics. And they're the ones, quantum mechanics, quantum cosmology, they're the ones that say, when we look for these objectively, inherently existent, autonomous particles of matter, whether photons, particles of energy, or elementary particles, when we look for them as they exist from their own side, we don't find them. They're not there. The issue came up, they're conceptual constructs. But the atoms aren't really out there. And if they're not really out there in space and time that are not really out there, the notion that matter is primary is now a complete and ridiculous fiction. So I would sum this up to say the world of scientific materialism is a fantasy that exists only in the minds of those who believe in it. And it does not even provide proficient explanatory power for understanding the nature of the mind and its role of nature. It's a dinosaur. It's already dead, but is walking around like a dinosaur zombie. And many, even scientists, still believe, oh, materialism, materialism. But they're living in the 19th century. It's a fabrication, it's a delusion, but a very destructive one. Just one quote by one of the world's leading theoretical physicists, Andrei Linde, a Russian-American at Stanford University, very brilliant, very eminent. This statement is worth reading, and I'll just read right through it. But this is mainstream. This is Stanford University by a brilliant physicist. Without introducing an observer, we have a dead universe which does not evolve in time, and this re-emphasizes the role of the participant in the self-observing universe of quantum cosmology. The universe becomes alive, that is time-dependent. It can change, evolve, transform, only when one divides it into two parts, a subjective observer and the rest of the objective universe, and the wave function of the rest of the objective universe depends on the time measured by the observer. In other words, the evolution of the universe and everything in it, including life itself, is possible only with respect to the observer. He's not a Buddhist, he's not a mystic, he's not religious. He's just a first-rate theoretical physicist. That the universe is fundamentally participatory in nature. Subject and object are not fundamentally separate, and the role of the mind in nature is absolutely fundamental. Now, Buddhists have been saying that for a long time, but this is coming from science, and brilliant science, and specifically physics. The greatest damaging blow to materialism is by the scientists who know the nature of matter better than anybody else. So, that's huge. A lot more could be said, but I'd leave that to more knowledgeable people than myself. Overcoming connate delusion. Primary form of connate delusion that we're born with is grasping to phenomena, including mind and matter, subject and objects, as in having inherent, independent natures of their own. We're born with it, and it's delusional. But it can be overcome with wisdom, with vipassana, insight meditation. What's the remedy? To realize how all conditioned phenomena, mental, physical, and any other type of phenomena, all conditioned phenomena exist as dependently related events, pratitya samutpada. They're all arising in dependent origination, and they're dependent upon prior causes and conditions. They don't just come out of nowhere. Every entity has parts and constituent attributes. The entity can't exist without the simultaneous parts and attributes. But the entity that has the attributes is not the same as the attributes. So it's simultaneously dependent on its parts and attributes. You have a body and mind. You wouldn't exist without your body and mind. But you're not a body or a mind, you have a body and mind. And your existence is dependent. Your existence as a human being is dependent upon your having a human body and mind. And the third one is the most mysterious one, the deepest one. And this has already come up today. The third kind of dependence is dependence upon the conceptual designation of them. And this is the role of the participant, of the observer. We superimpose our conceptual constructs on reality as if they were already there, but no, they are superimposed. And then we can speak of atoms and particles and waves and space and time and subject and object, but these are all conceptual constructs, but they're not discovered. They're superimposed. This is deep. This is really deep work. Emotional intelligence, oh, I could spend all day on this, and I'd love to, but it's already 4 minutes past 5. This is sublime. These are the Brahma Viharas, the divine abidings, the 4 immeasurables. Let's just go through them quickly and we'll wrap up very soon. But there's a sequence to these, and they're magnificent, they're glorious, they cut through all boundaries of one religion to another, religion and non-religion. I would say without a shadow of a doubt that these 4 virtues are universal. There are 2 trillion galaxies in the universe, and I would say these are virtues in every one of those galaxies. They're universal. And no one religion has a monopoly on them, for sure. Loving kindness, the aspiration that all beings may find happiness and the causes of happiness. But loving kindness, which is a sublime virtue, potentially an immeasurable virtue that embraces all sentient beings, one can be tricked by something that looks like loving kindness and isn't, called a false facsimile. What looks like loving kindness, but in fact isn't at all, but it can trick you, as it seems to be. The false facsimile is self-centered attachment. It happens a lot in, how do you say, the way men treat women. It's just one example. But if a young man really wants to, attract a woman because he wants something from her, what's he going to do? Oh, I love you. Would you like these flowers? Can I take you out? What can I do for you? I really like you. I really love you. And it's all a technique to get from the woman something he wants. And she may think, oh, he loves me. Well, he wants something from you. But it looks like love, but it's not. Because if he doesn't get it, then he can throw you away like trash. Now that's just one example. But there are countless examples. It looks like love, and it's not. It's just self-centered detachment being very tricky and appearing to be loving kindness, and it's not. The opposite is ill will, where you wish others not to find happiness. Compassion, as I mentioned a day or two ago, is not an emotion, it too is an aspiration. But all beings may be free of suffering and the causes of suffering. It's an aspiration. It sees the possibility that beings could be free and aspires for it. The false facsimile is simply despair or feeling sorry for. Oh, I'm so sorry for this person. I'm so sorry for those people who suffered because of the typhoon. Or, oh, I'm so sorry for. And then you go back and watch the television. It's most people, right? When we hear about a catastrophe, especially it's far away, oh, that's in Pakistan. Thank goodness it's not in California. Oh, that's in Russia. Thank goodness it's not in Taiwan. And we say, okay, then it's not my problem. But simply feeling sorry for or falling into despair or depression, global climate change, the meta crisis, oh, I'm depressed, I don't know. Oh, it's so sad, and maybe you start crying. That's not compassion. That's despair, and it may look like compassion, and it's not. Compassion has power, courage, vision, aspiration, and waiting to get into action, to follow what Dr. He was saying. Compassion in action, not just sitting home and saying, oh, it's so sad, they're suffering so much. Who cares? You're sitting at home and you're crying for other people. Who cares? That's not benefiting anybody. It looks like compassion, is not. It's just despair or feeling sorry for. Empathetic joy, oh, and the opposite is cruelty, where we actually want others to suffer, people we don't like, people of opposite political party, and so on. Cruelty is diametrically opposed to compassion. Empathetic joy is the often one that's left out. But it's sublime. It connects us with others. Empathetic joy, also an aspiration that all beings may never be separated from sublime well-being, genuine well-being, free of suffering. With empathetic joy, we delight in other people's joy. Their joy becomes our joy. Their virtues, we delight in them, and they become our virtues. We share, our whole heart opens to embrace all those around us, and when they are healthy and they're happy and they're joyful, we rejoice in it. When they're engaging in acts of compassion, of altruism, we rejoice in it, and we become partners in our hearts. We become partners. empathetic joy. It's a sublime virtue, and it's not difficult. Not difficult. The final one is difficult. Impartiality is the best translation. The aspiration that all beings may dwell in impartiality, free of attachment to those who are close and aversion to those who are distant. There's a lot of conditional compassion out there. Conditional for one's own group, people in one's own nation, one's own ethnic group, one's own religion, one's own family, one's own community, but then, but not for the other ones. And that's just a form of attachment. But impartiality is looking at all manner of countries, communist and capitalist, dictatorships and democracies, beautiful people and ugly people, virtuous people and non-virtuous people, and say all of these beings, everyone around us, every one of these beings is deserving of happiness, wants to find happiness. Every one of them wants to be free of suffering, wants to be free of the causes of suffering. Every one. May we all find the happiness we seek. May we all find freedom of suffering. Breaking down and dissolving all divisions of my side and your side. The vanishing of toxic nationality. Because the notion that America number one, it's idiocy. It's idiocy to think, my country first. My country first. Because the borders between countries are imaginary. They have no existence. If you look at the ground, where's the border between one country and another? You never see it. It's imaginary. Between ethnic groups, it's imaginary. How many people are of mixed race? Millions. And to be attached to one's own ethnic group, one's own religion, nationality, and so forth, all the borders are imaginary. And therefore, impartiality, unconditional love, compassion, empathy, joy, is realistic. And anything that is not impartial is living in a fantasy, that there are real borders. Where exactly is the border between mainland China and Taiwan? Where exactly is that border? In the ocean someplace? Please show me the line. I'd love to see the real border. Where does Taiwan end? And how high do you have to go? How high is Taiwanese air? Is it in the stratosphere? How high? And how deep? All these borders are imaginary. And the only realistic thing is to care for all sentient beings equally. We're almost finished, and you've been very patient. And you haven't fallen asleep. Spiritual intelligence has to do with fathoming the ultimate ground of being, the actual nature of reality, the ultimate meaning of life. Many people are not even asking the question, which means they're suffering from a spiritual deficit. But we, with our extraordinary intelligence, we human beings, perhaps uniquely among the species of living creatures on the planet, we have the ability to ask ultimate questions. In the Uttara Tantra, one of the works of Maitreya, very resonant from what we know from Chan, from Chinese Buddhism, Buddha nature, Tathagata Garbha, the ultimate ground of being. This is from Maitreya, the Bodhisattva Maitreya, because the perfect Buddhakaya, which is Dharmakaya, Buddha mind, emanates everywhere. It's all pervasive. Now, we've heard this repeatedly from some of the speakers today. This is a dimension of reality where all borders are gone. It's limitless, divine, transcendent consciousness, and it's everywhere present. Emanates everywhere because it's inseparable from suchness, which is emptiness. All phenomena are empty of inherent nature, and therefore no division between ultimate consciousness and ordinary consciousness. Ordinary consciousness is saturated by ultimate consciousness. And because all embodied beings have the lineage, they all possess the Buddha nature. We're all of the lineage of the Buddhas. Every sentient being, human and non-human alike, we're all of the lineage of the family of Buddhas, which means every sentient being has a capacity to be perfectly enlightened. And that's our aspiration. That's the Bodhisattva's aspiration. Not only to alleviate some suffering here and then it's gone, alleviate here, putting out fires. But the Bodhisattva aspiration is not only may all adversities be dealt with and alleviate suffering, but may all sentient beings discover who they really are, discover Buddha nature, and achieve a perfect awakening. But if we haven't achieved perfect awakening ourselves, how do we possibly lead others to a state of realization we haven't experienced ourselves? It's like a person saying, well, there's a path from here to some distant destination. I've never been on it, but good luck, and I'll tell you about it. So this is why one meditates, to realize inwardly your own Buddha nature, to realize emptiness. So when you want to help others, you can help them not only alleviate temporary suffering, but you can lead them to the irreversible path of spiritual maturation that culminates in Buddhahood itself. That's spiritual intelligence. So just a final quote, I think it's the last one. This is from the Dzogchen tradition in Tibetan Buddhism. This ground, this ultimate ground of being, is present in the mind streams of all sentient beings, but it's tightly constricted by dualistic grasping. I over here, you over there, subject and object. Then it freezes, and it's regarded as self and others as something real, and this view stabilizes and fortifies itself. This reification, this grasping, I'm really here, you're over there, my mind, your mind, subject, object, everything freezes, becomes fortified, and all the problems of the world come from that dualistic grasping. And we've heard this before from multiple speakers today. As an analogy, water which is naturally fluid becomes frozen due to the intervention of a cold wind. And likewise, the ground, the ultimate ground of being, which is naturally free, appears as real things due to the intervention of dualistic grasping. We heard that from the physicist André Linde. And here it is from a great Tibetan mystic from the 19th century. There's a convergence of reality here, from the deepest of science, deepest of spirituality. And it's pointing away to a truth, a reality that transcends all of the divisions that we create. Whoops. May all be auspicious for us to fathom the mind, and by fathoming the mind, by drawing fully from the resources of the mind, the magnificent resources of the mind, our capacity for compassion, our capacity for wisdom, our capacity for genuine well-being. In that way, we really can heal the world. We really can. And that's our hope. That's our prayer. But we know we have many people around the world that share this vision. And with all of us working together, there is hope. It's been a very long day. You've been very patient, and nobody's fallen asleep. So, thank you for your precious time, and thank you for making my visit here so meaningful.